Ready, Greg?
Ready, Jay.
You're listening to The Success Paradigm with your hosts, Jay Atkins and Greg Gray.
All right, we are excited today. So, want to make sure I give the proper introduction to this gentleman. Our guest on today's edition of the Success Paradigm is Dr. Jericho Brown, author of The Tradition, for which he won the 2020 Pulitzer Prize for poetry. He is a recipient of fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard, and the National Endowment for the Arts. And he is a winner of the Whiting Award. His first book, Please, won the American Book Award. His second book, The New Testament, won the Anisfield-Wolf Book Award. His third collection, The Tradition, let me say that right, won the Paterson Poetry Prize and was a finalist for the National Book Award and the National Book Critics Circle Award. His poems have appeared in the Bennington Review, Buzzfeed, Fence, Jubilat, the New Republic, the New York Times, the New Yorker, the Paris Review. It goes on, the Time magazine, and several volumes of the best American poetry. Dr. Brown earned a PhD from the University of Houston, an MFA from the University of New Orleans, and a BA from Dillard University. Just a little of his professional background. He was a teaching fellow in the English department at University of Houston, a visiting professor at San Diego State University, and an assistant professor of English at the University of San Diego. Right now, his day job is that he is the director of creative writing of the creative writing program at Emory University as a professor there. Maybe as important as all the rest of that is, and it is, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that he is also an initiate of the greatest fraternity known to mankind.
The only one.
Alpha, yes, that's right. Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated.
The only one.
Brother Dr. Jericho Brown, welcome to the Success Paradigm.
Hey, brother, great. Thank you. I need you to read all that again, in front of some other people soon.
I'll keep it
It's
queued
really
up.
nice to hear. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know.
Well,
How
that's
do
a
you
lot.
find that? That's really nice. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, successful people are easy to Google. So I will tell you that is part of what it is. So we are super excited about having you on, and the Success Paradigm is really all about getting a chance to talk to people that have significant achievements and accomplishments in their life, but to talk about it not so much from the achievement point of view, because you have there are numerous accolades, obviously, that you've achieved over your life. In this forum, though, we are as interested in, actually more interested in the story that leads up to the glory of those awards. So, Jay and I have had a number of guests, and very wide ranging, from business people to actresses to business women. And so now we get to break ground here with a Pulitzer Prize winner of poetry. So, are you ready to get started, sir?
Yes, I'm ready to get started.
Excellent. This is exciting. So, the first question I have for you is, what, as you have gotten more accolades and more recognition for the things that you've achieved, what have you found to be the most difficult part of success? Everyone knows the great part, but what has been the trickiest or most difficult part?
Well,
of success?
I think because I'm an artist, and a poet in particular, I think it's simply translation.
Okay.
When you're doing whatever it is that you do, you still have to live in the world. You still want to go out to eat. You still want to have a date sometimes. You still want to make a sandwich without any pressure. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult to translate to people that I'm going to be okay. I for a long time, it was hard to explain to my parents what I was doing with my life. Because, it's true. Brother Gray, this is true. People ask you, what do you do? And it's nice to have a good answer. But when the answer is that you're a poet, they think you're lying. or they think you're playing with them. Do you understand what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Right.
translation, I think, is the most difficult part of what I do, but it's also the blessing in many ways. There's a way that I have to move inside experience, inside society, inside the brotherhood that we have. Um, and yet I'm always sort of standing outside of those things as well. And so therefore I can get a view of myself within them, because I know that there may be a misunderstanding about exactly what it is that I do and how I do it and why I'm able to get paid for it. And that's probably been the most difficult part of being a poet for me. And I think it's the most difficult part of being an artist for any artist. Can you imagine taking somebody trying to take you out on a date, right? And you like the guy, oh, this is a nice guy. What do? I'm a dancer. It doesn't seem like you're gonna be able to keep things going. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think me being able to understand that I was in a sort of a outcast position that I could make use of was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because that's the case for the history of writing all over the world. Writers, in some ways, have been outcast and misunderstood.
Hmm. Yep. So, okay, there you go.
So, Greg opened up with, what we try to find out on here is the story, and what I'm most interested in, and the thing I love about this podcast is I love to ask questions and I love to learn, and I love to learn from everyone, and I love taking notes, and you're going to see me take a lot of notes throughout this because I know you're going to drop lots of knowledge
Sure.
on your journey of success. So, what I want to know is, I don't know that I've ever heard anybody read that many accolades for one person
Mm.
over a short life that you've had. I'm interested in knowing where it all began, and I know you're an artist, but you're pretty smart to have made your art turn into a career and money and something that you love to do. So
Mhm.
where did it all start? Like
Mhm.
when you were young and going to get all of your college education and your PhD and everything, like where did it all start to drive to become this person that you now are, like, you know, the Pulitzer Prize winning, like when he read that, just the smile every time, like this smile that comes, people are going to see this on YouTube, but people that hear this on our podcast are not going to see this gigantic smile of accomplishment on your face and must feel so amazing. Where did it start?
Um, I think it really just started with being a kid who was, um, I was raised in that situation that we used to know. We used to tell children they were to be seen and not heard. But I had a lot to say and a lot to react to. And because I had a lot to say and a lot to react to, but I understood it would be dangerous for me to say everything I had to say. And by dangerous, I mean I had a mother and a father that I had the sense to be afraid of. So, so when I was a kid, I found that I could write down the things that I knew better than to say, and that what I would write down would always be supported because people will see a young person, and when I say young, I mean a little boy, 6, 7, 8, 9. I always had notebooks and I was always writing things down. And everyone was so pleased with that. They were, people, oh, he's smart, he's writing. Do you know what I mean? And so any opportunity I could get, that's what I would do. And no one ever cared what I was writing. I mean, the same people who were saying that I was smart, I was probably saying awful things about in my writing. But it was something that I understood I could keep for myself. And over time, it was something that I began to understand that I could perfect. And I got that understanding in two ways. One is because I grew up in the Black church where everything is perfected. And by that, what I mean is when you go to a church service, every step of the way, every spoken word that you hear is spoken with a kind of lifted, it's plain folk speech and yet lifted in a certain amount of dignity. The songs are sung with a certain amount of dignity. The way people get up and sit down was done with a certain kind of order. And that really informed watching the preacher, my pastor, my childhood pastor, recently passed of complications due to COVID-19. But watching him preach on Sunday really let me know that there was a way to do things. So that was one way, and then the other way is just that I spent a lot of time in the library. My mother, she's an improvisational genius, and she understood that she could take us to the library when she couldn't be with us. If she needed to run an errand where she couldn't have rambunctious kids with her, she could leave us at the library. Now that's different. Y'all can't take your kids to the library because they will tear the library up. But my mom, like I said, we were afraid of her. So she knew we would be fine at the library. And when I was there, I remember, I should add to this that at the time, there was nothing in library but books. Now when you go to a library, the first 2 floors are computers. But when I was a kid, there were no computers. There were only books. And so my sister and I had no choice but to immerse ourselves in books and to learn to love them. And I remember picking up books of prose and being intimidated because I was an 8-year-old and I would see all these words and I was like, how am I going to do this? Oh my God. And I would feel overwhelmed, but I came across books of poetry and I was like, now we talking. A poem will sometimes take up 1/4 of the page. So I was like, oh, I got this. I can do this. And I read a lot of poetry when I was a kid, a lot of books. The first time, I don't remember the first book I read, but I remember what happened the first time I read a book. The first time I read a book of poetry, I got in the car with my mom and she said, what did y'all do in the library? Which she often said. And I said, I read a book, Mommy. And my mother made this face that I had never seen. It was such delight. And my mother always sang soprano in the church choir, but it was like super soprano, is my baby read a book. I mean, it took her like 4 minutes to say book. And I really felt like I was onto something. So originally, I really just wanted to please. I really just wanted what we all want. I wanted to please a parent. I wanted to see that face made again. And so me writing in the corners of my house and in my room when I was a kid, and me reading what I was reading in the library and seeing what I was seeing at the church, all those things began to intersect. And I realized that there was something that I enjoyed doing that I could do in a perfected way, that I could do better, that I could learn more about. And I think it became my quest even when I was a kid. Now, I thought that journey would be a much longer journey. I thought I had to be, I had to have my real job first. I would have to have my real job, my first job, as I remember aunts and uncles saying, when I was a kid, people would ask me what I want to do. And I would say, be a poet. And then they would say to me, and what do you want to do for your first job? So I really thought, I had to be, 70 years old and have a long white beard and be white in order to live this life that I had imagined wanting to live. Not that I would be able to do it as soon as I was able to do it. So that was if we just go back to the beginning, that was the real beginning for me.
So I just have a continuing question, and I'll let Greg, you ask next. But along that journey, I'm sure you had some bumps, some obstacles, some bruises that made you question this dream when you were 10 of being a poet.
Mm-hmm.
How did you overcome those? And because I'm positive that you had so many people kind of giving you sideways looks and saying, mm-hmm. A poet? Like, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's cool and all for a hobby, but what are you really going to do? Like, so when you had all that coming at you, how did you overcome that?
Well, it's hard to talk about this without really looking at it paradoxically. I never had, I always, I love my dad. I was just on the phone with him yesterday. That man loves me. He might be the only man who ever did. But my dad loves me and I love my dad. But growing up, me and my dad, we would go at it, and he would win because he had the belt. But there was always tension between us. And so I was And it's so funny because in spite of the fact that there was tension between us, I understood that that tension had to do with the fact that we were so much alike. I knew that even then. And he did too. One of the ways that he would understand that I was, when I was doing things I wasn't supposed to be doing is I would do them just the way he would do it. When I was trying to hide stuff, I would hide it just the way he would hide it. So I think I grew up, my father was very encouraging of us as it relates to our education in particular. And so, and I understood that he was right. He was very encouraging of us as it related to our, that we have a relationship with God. He was very encouraging to us as it relates to, as it related to purpose, as it related to, getting a job someday and doing something that really matters to you. So there were all these ways in which I was always right on time. We were right in step with one another. But because we had these other conflicts, I understood that I had to believe everything that he was teaching me for me and not for him. Right. So his idea of get a job was be a lawyer or be a doctor. And I thank God today that I understood there were other options. My parents didn't know that there were other options. As a matter of fact, I think in general for parents at the time, when you think about what your children are going to do, you think about it, or at least for my parents, they would think about it in two ways. One is, how do I know this child is going to be okay? Right? And what's going to make them okay and not ask me for any money, right? And then the second thing is, what happens when people at church ask me what Trey is doing? Trey is the name I grew up with as a kid, my nickname. I was born Nelson Demery III, so everybody in my family, everybody back home calls me Trey. And I remember, and I know now that, if somebody at your church says, what is your son or daughter doing? And you say, she's a lawyer, she's a doctor, there's a face that that person makes, right? And that's the face you want. You want to know you did all right. You want to know you did what you were supposed to do as a parent. And you want everybody in your circle to give you the face saying, oh, you did what you were supposed to do. And it's very difficult, I think, to have that same face and say, oh, he's a poet, because that doesn't translate, right? And so my job has always been, for me, was one of my goals, I would say, a secret goal. It's not really something I think about when I'm writing poems, but I'm just glad that my parents are alive to see a day like today and other days. And, I've had other successes with my parents. I was the commencement speaker at my own PhD graduation, which was a huge surprise for them. But that kind of thing, I think, has been really good for me, because I could take the things that my father was teaching me, but I could say, I need to do this for me. And our relationship was conflicted enough where I could rebel. I could rebel against him enough to know what he's saying is right, but it's got to be right for what I need for my own life. Does that answer? I forgot the question. I'm so busy answering it.
I love the answer. Either way it goes. So here's where what you do is something that a lot of people aspire to do. And I say just writing. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you that, I've struggled through writing a couple of books. And I will tell you, it's literally been the hardest thing I have ever done in my life.
Arduous.
Yes, to get from one paragraph to the next paragraph. And, there's a book that has been about to be published next year for like 6 years now. So I actually stopped putting on Facebook because I kept saying coming in spring of this year. And somebody said, that's the same picture you used last year. You forgot to change the year. I was like, okay. So I asked, so that's kind of the backdrop to the question. The question is, when was the time, or was there a time where you spiritually or emotionally just kind of hit the wall and said, damn, I know this is what I want to do, but this path just seems too difficult, or it could have been the path, or it could have been somebody standing in the path, where, you know, the analogy is throwing in the towel. Did you
Hmm.
have a moment, even if it was a brief one like that? And if you did, what got you through it and over to the other side of it?
Oh, Greg, I always have. I mean, I haven't had just one moment. I've had so many moments. It's hard for me to. It's really difficult for me to make it anecdotal. I remember the hardest year of my life was, I would say, 2005. Early in the year, maybe late 2004, but definitely by early 2005. My grandmother, who I love dearly, um, she died. She passed later in that year. Hurricane Katrina happened, and then my mother had a stroke. At the same time, I was taking my comps for my PhD exams, my comprehensive exams, and I remember I was just overwhelmed. I had people living on my floor who had come in from the flood, and we were driving back and forth to help them, get their lives together. I was trying to help take care of my mother. I was home for 3 or 4 days. I was living in Houston, driving back and forth to Shreveport, driving back and forth to New Orleans,
Mm,
missing my grandmother, who had always been such a huge support for me. Um, it was the hardest time of my life, and then to top it off, in the first round, you get 2 rounds that you get to take them, but in the first round of my PhD programs, I failed the exam,
mm,
which was amazing to me because the only thing I had ever been before is smart. Do you know what I mean?
right.
When you grow up hearing this over and over, if you fail an exam, then that gets taken away from you. And so then what the hell are you if you ain't smart? Do you
Mm,
understand what I mean?
yeah.
So and it was an exam on poetry. What do I know more about than poetry? Do you know what I mean? But I couldn't study for it because um I was holding down something like 3 to 5 jobs at the time, as well as going to school. I was just doing too much. Um, and I think the wonderful thing about getting knocked, we've heard this, it's cliche, but when you get knocked down, that gives you a chance to look up. And I then had an opportunity to reorganize my life. And that moment in my life made me very suddenly aware of who I was and where I was from in ways that I hadn't been before. Uh, I think many people experience this probably around maybe I don't know if there's an age where I wouldn't say there's an age where you experience it, but for instance, my grandparents on both sides of my family were sharecroppers. Now I grew up with that knowledge, but I didn't grow up with that sentence. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they were my grandparents. So I didn't
Right.
think about them that way. I
Mhm.
didn't think about the ways that they had to, on both sides of my family, my grandparents had to leave rural areas and go to, my grandfather on my mom's side of the family had to um, go to from Mississippi to Louisiana running from white people, like literally.
Mhm.
My grandmother ended up in Shreveport, Louisiana, where I'm from originally, because her family was being completely tormented by the people on the whose plantation where they were living, whose farm where they were living at the time. So I became very aware in the middle of all of that what I was going through, I wasn't the first person to go through a hard time, and that I wouldn't be the first person to survive it, right? That I
Mhm.
had everything that anybody had done behind me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, and I would look at what my very close friends and frat brothers were going through in New Orleans in particular, and I would look at what was going on in my home life and how difficult it was for my father. My father didn't know how to use a microwave. When my
Mm,
mother had a stroke, my dad did not know, he didn't know how to function because so much of his life had been taken care of in that realm by his wife.
mhm.
And then he's got to deal with me as his help. And I'm like, you don't know how to use a microwave? Do you know, like, I don't have
Yeah.
patience for him either. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? So I think seeing that when all those things happened, and then I had this sort of bad report of the PhD exam, and then I had to go back and study for the thing in a real way this time all over again. But this time when I went back to study, I went back to study knowing that I had all of my ancestors behind me. Um, that I was in a position that they had only dreamed of being in. My grandfather had 13 kids, and I think he sent something like 6 or 7 of them to college. Why? How? Why would he even know to do that, to support that? Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so here I am in a PhD program that ain't just college, And I think it was the first time I really took in the gravity of what I was doing and what I was trying to do. I was trying to do this thing, but I hadn't thought of it as an important thing. I'm just taking the next step. And then I understood, this thing that I am doing has meaning for my family, has meaning for me, beyond my family, and will have meaning for other people if there's ever a story told about me. So that's why that's how I was able to get out of that particular moment, I would say.
Wow. One of many, but that
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
a
but it's
standout.
always good, it's always good when you have these moments to really look around and take stock of how far you have come. Um, like I said, I remember when I was in Houston, I remember I would calculate the amount of times I could get in my car because I knew there would only be so much gas in the car every month because I was getting a check that went as far as it went. And if I wanted to go somewhere else, somebody was going to give me a ride. I don't think, I can get frustrated if I want to about
Right.
whatever I want to get frustrated about. But if I want to get in my car and go somewhere now, I'm going to go. Do you understand what I mean? And if you
Sure.
can, I think if I can really think about things in that way, then whatever I'm going through in the moment, I understand is only for the moment. And it's really important that we understand that there's sort of I have to believe that all is well, right? And if all is well, then when things do not seem well, then they are an illusion. They are fleeting. They're not the whole story.
Wow. Love it.
So Jericho, we were getting more of your story throughout. I mean, you just kind of threw out there that, when you were, going to take your PhD test, you had 3 to 5 jobs, you couldn't even keep track of how many jobs you had back then and doing your PhD. So, just another part of the story that people don't think about, right? They glory, they don't see, even the mindset of, I got enough gas and then whatever I got to do, my next solution is I'm going to get a ride with somebody. So
Yeah.
I think that's, the gravity of success, right? That's the mindset of success. But, what is one mistake? And we've all made many, many, many mistakes. But what is one mistake or one failure that you feel has made you better?
Oh, this is a great question. One mistake or one failure that I feel has made me better? That's a really good question because I
Welcome
don't
to the
have.
show.
I know, right? I usually, I've been answering questions all week, man. Good job, Jay. You win. I would say, that one of the things that I really just had to learn is how to unite myself with people who who could deal with the fact of the dream, no matter how much it seemed like a dream. And before that, um, I wasn't. I was uniting myself with the people who were there, and that counts even for your family. Your family is your family to be loved, but everybody's not going to understand or go with the dream. And that's fine. Everybody doesn't have to. We're under this impression that everybody's going to support us every step of the way, but everybody's not, because if you're doing something unique, if you're doing something original, if you're doing something special, of course people are going to misunderstand it. And of course, some of those people are going to be close to you. And so one of the things that I figured out is that I'm not supposed to nobody else brings their family to work. Nobody brings their parents to work with them. Right. People are always asking me, so what did your parents think when they read your book? I'm like, I don't know. Did they read the book? I hope not. Like, that's not if I were an architect, I wouldn't show my dad the plans for the new mall. If I were a checkout guy at Kroger, I wouldn't have my mom watch me ring people up. Do you understand what I mean? So and once I understood better that part of my trouble in terms of, and we sort of talked about this a little bit earlier, is that I was internalizing negative opinions about something that other people could not see. Everything that could be seen was only in my head, right? And one of the ways that I understood that friendships and business partnerships would have to be made is that they could only be made with people if I could have some glimpse of their dream and they could have some glimpse of mine. We actually don't talk about this enough, how important this is in relationships, in love relationships in particular. You know, a lot of times we're uniting ourselves with people who don't really understand, you know, because, you know, it feel good, they look good, but you have to unite yourself with people who understand the plan, right? And you have to have an understanding for their plan as well. And, you know, both of y'all look like y'all old enough to have been in love before. So you know that it's different when you're in love with somebody who has a plan and you understand their plan and you have a plan and they understand your plan than like these two plans that are not even meeting anywhere, right? So I think that's been the biggest mistake or maybe setback that I've had, you know, sort of running. And I have much less of this now. I'm not really interested. I mean, you know, I used to be a person who was concerned about what people thought of me. That's easy to say. Like people say this a lot, like, I don't care what people think about me, right? But that's work. Like becoming a person who is not very concerned about what other people think about you is a lot of work and a lot of risk. Because you're going to be in a world where what people think about you seems to matter in ways that maybe it doesn't actually matter.
Especially with social media now.
Yeah, it's crazy because people are building lives they don't even live on social media, right? Which should tell you something about how they feel about their own real lives, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, so this is fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
And I told Jay when we initially had the conversation, I said, so you will be able to see through Jericho like a pane of glass. He is not, and I think it is in a very positive way. It's connected to what you just said.
Yeah.
Because there's uh, there's courage and there's fearlessness, and they are kind of the same, but they're not exactly the same. And so when you are this kid that was writing stuff down and basically what was your own personal journals and keeping track of your thoughts and doing so because you know it probably allow you to live into the next year versus saying them out loud in the wrong setting at Thanksgiving. When was, or can you pinpoint a time where you felt that you might have gone from um, fearful is maybe too strong a word, but uh, cautious to fearless? Was there a moment or something that happened or someone um, that was there or pivotal in that moment?
So let me, I'll say this. I know what you're asking, but I'm going to answer something else, and then
Okay,
hopefully,
that works.
you know, I'm very pleased to have won the Pulitzer Prize for poetry, and I look forward to all the money that it's going to bring my way. Seriously, I do. I mean, I'm glad for all you know, I love a little attention. You know, give me a reason to do some push-ups. You know what I'm saying? Put a little hair dye on my beard. I'm all for it, right? Um, and I'm happy. It's actually something that I dreamed of when I was 10 years old in the 5th grade. The second Black person to ever won the Pulitzer Prize. And there was a big hoopla in my elementary school because, you know, they were amazed. Black people can read. So I remember that feeling, and that feeling came back to me. I mean, it was a real full circle moment for me, and I understand the prestige of of the award and the legacy of the award, and I'm happy for that. I think of the award as the recognition and not the achievement. The achievement is not the Pulitzer Prize. The achievement is the poem. And what I do is I write poems. I write books of poetry, right? And when, in terms of achievement for me, the moment when I feel like I'm in the midst of really having done something is when in my head I can think, oh, I wonder if I can make this metaphor work this way. I wonder if I can make this line work this way. Or why doesn't a poem have a tone like this? I wonder if I can make this tone work. And then I can see that idea coming through in the poems I actually write. That's the achievement for me. So when I think about, for me, I don't think necessarily about fear and courage. I think about shame and shamelessness.
Mm.
And I remember I was in New Orleans. I was going to a workshop called the Nomo Literary Society, and it was a workshop for Black writers of every genre. And I remember Kalamu Yasalam, who was leading the workshop at that time, telling me, this poem you're working on here is, I see you're trying to do something, and it's unashamed, but it's not yet shameless, right?
Mm.
And I think when I think about those moments, I don't think of them as anecdotally as I do think of them as risks that I've been able to take in my own writing. It became very clear to me as a reader that what I was attracted to, I mean, the work that really makes the difference, the things that people are reading in school, actually at the time that those things came out, were wild and crazy and radical and weird writing. And so I understood soon enough that I was going to have to make what I wanted to see. And I really think this is important. When I talk to young people, it's important for them to know that whatever you do, you've got to do the thing. Instead of telling people, do what you love, I like to tell people, do what you need, meet the need in the world. So I am a reader. I like to read books. And in all my reading, no matter how much I love books, I see a whole. I see something where a contribution can be made. So when I write a poem, I keep trying to write the poem I don't see in the library. When I write a poem, I want to write the poem that hasn't been read, right? And I think that's the case for anybody. If you're an engineer, you want to do that. If you're teaching a class, you want to do that the way you would want it done, right? It's sort of the expansion of the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Whatever it is, when you put on your clothes, dress like somebody you want to see. Do you understand what I mean? And I think doing that takes a certain amount, for me, has taken a certain amount of shamelessness and honesty that I had to accept, that I wasn't going to make good work unless I could be completely shameless and tell the truth in my work. So when you read my poem, and a lot of people, especially now, they're like, oh, send me a book, and oh, I just bought a book. And I'm like, okay, you just bought a book. Be careful when you open that thing. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
In order for me to write these poems, I've had to tell the truth. One of the poems that I'm most proud of in this last book, has a line in it, and it seems so simple, but it was actually very difficult. The sentence says, "I love my mother." Now, that seems like the easiest thing in the world to say, and yet in a poem that becomes very difficult because it's sentimental, it's precious, right? It's saccharine, right? But it's also true. So the question for me is, how do I get to say I love my mother in a poem? Something that simple, right? But there are other kinds of things that you just have to admit to if you're going to do the kind of work that I'm doing. And I think me being able to move from that had to do with me being able to move toward a kind of shamelessness, had to do with me understanding I can do this at any level I want to do this, right? I could be a guy who has another job and every once in a while reads at the local open mic. I could be the guy who, has a book come out every once in a while. Oh, I got a book out. I talk to people sometimes and they'll say, oh, I had a book come out, or I could, it seems to me, lose my mind every time I try to write a poem. And what I try to do when I write a poem is lose my mind. I want to change the definition of what a poem is. Every time I write a poem, I want to change. I want to say, well, let's see what a poem can do. You so big and bad, poem. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's the best example I have of moving towards shamelessness, is being able to say the things that I would otherwise not say in small talk in the grocery store line, and having my poems be the location of those things where I can be honest about who I am and what I see when I look at the world.
I I think that is a much better way to look at it.
Yeah,
Shamelessness. Yep.
yeah.
So Jericho, another thing that we talk about on this podcast often is, I mean, this is an odd question for you because again, all the accolades that we introduced you with, you line up 100 people, I think all of them would say that's a successful human being, and he's had
Mhm,
great success in his life. But I think everyone's level of success is different. Some
mhm,
people want to be billionaires. Some people want to make $500,000 a year and spend time with their family,
mhm,
travel.
mhm.
What what is what does success look like for you? What is your definition of success for Jericho?
Yeah, this is maybe not the best answer for your show, but I just like to go to sleep at night knowing I did everything I was supposed to do that day. I like knowing I didn't tell a lie today. I like knowing that I didn't parade myself as somebody else. That's important to me because for a long time I did parade myself as somebody else, right? And the more that I'm in line with a certain amount of authenticity, the more I feel like I've reached success. The more I can tell my truth and tell other people that which is true for me. The more I feel like, oh, I must be free to do so. And so for me, success is really about freedom. Now, it is true that money has a lot to do with freedom, and has a lot to do with how free you feel. It's also true that awards and accolades have a lot to do with freedom. It has a lot to do with what kind of power you have in whatever industry you're in, right? The when you buy a book, often you'll see on the back of a book a blurb from somebody else saying, "This is a good book, you should read it." And the Jericho Brown blurb for other people's book just went up, right? It's just like now that has a different kind of value than what it did before. Um, and I'm aware of all those things, but I'm also aware that I could have all those things and still feel really horribly about myself when I go to bed at night. And so what's important to me, I feel like this is a horrible time for a lot of people. This is um, really a very scary moment for a lot of folk. I have a lot of friends in particular who are performers, artists, actors, dancers. What are they supposed to be doing? Singers, guitarists. What are they supposed to be doing right now? How are they going to feed their families? Um, but one thing that I can say about this moment for me is that it has allowed me to get back into a real full throttle discipline about prayer and meditation. I mean, when I wake up, the first thing I do is try to take account for things and name something in particular. And when I say name something, it's not just oh, I'm so glad I woke up this morning, or I'm so happy for the sky, but a real particular thing for me that I can be excited about, right? And then at night to look back at that same thing and try to name something new that I saw during the day. And just taking time like that, if I can do that for a number of days in a row, then I feel like I got $1 million. You know what I'm saying? So
Yep.
I think those are real. I mean, to be honest, I think that's the real mark for me. Yeah.
Well, I think, there's no right or wrong answer, right? It's for everyone, and that's what we try to pull out of everyone, and I think that's a perfect answer. And I think every answer, that you've given has been deep, and well thought out, and that's why, we don't like to give questions ahead of time because they're the most authentic answer when you're at
Mhm.
them. So, I
Thank
love
you, Jay.
it. I think it's a great if you can live with yourself,
Yeah.
be happy with yourself, that is a level of success that
Yeah.
majority of people will never have.
Yeah. 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 Thank you.
Well, we talk very often about the fact that there's success and then there's significance.
Mhm.
And when you so I was struck by that. I actually lost track of what I was going to ask you next, believe it or not, when you said, I just want to go to bed at night knowing that my day was not basically that was not a lie,
Mhm.
that I didn't lie. I was
Mhm.
not a lie,
Mhm.
uh, because that makes it a little
Mhm.
easier to get up the next morning with a a brighter
Mm-hmm.
view of the world because you don't
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're dragging yesterday into
Mm-hmm.
today. So I've got a question for you. So you mentioned you've known you wanted to do this poet thing.
For a
I'd
long
say that
time.
in air quotes, right? uh, since you were what age? What age were you when it crystallized for you?
Um,
Because I have a question
I was
about
either
that.
4 or 5 because I was in a, I think I was not 4 or 5, fourth or fifth grade. I think I was 9 or 10 years old.
Okay, when it
Yeah.
became really clear to you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you had a time machine
Mm-hmm.
and could go back and find second grade Nelson,
Mm-hmm.
uh, knowing what you know about this journey that you've traveled and continue to travel, what would you tell second grade Nelson about that is probably, and I think it may be connected to what you said before already, but what would you tell second grade Nelson? What would you say to this 8-year old or 7-year old
Mm-hmm.
about what he should remember or be focused on or be thankful for or strive
Mm-hmm.
toward later in his life?
Well, I think I would probably tell him the same thing that I would tell I would tell I would tell myself now, and that's just calm down.
Mm,
The older I get, the better I am at maintaining a certain level of peace. But there are certain anxieties that manifest themselves, and sometimes because they'll be just little small things. Jude Esther, our frat brother, his dad made me a tuxedo for the National Book Award when I was a finalist, and I just wanted my tuxedo to be better than everybody else's tuxedo. And that became, I mean, it was just a tuxedo, you know what I'm saying? They all look alike, but mine was brown. I had to get a tuxedo that was the color of my skin. I was, you know,
yeah.
it's just grand.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um, so for me, um, it's just I would tell that kid to have a certain level of trust in himself, um, and I would remind him that whatever anxiety that he was feeling now was a temporary anxiety, and I'm telling myself that now, so I would probably tell myself that then. The other thing I think I would tell myself is to cling to what I love and pay attention to who I love and why I love those people. We all have we have role models that we might not ever meet. Young people, the people that are most loved are people like I guess Beyonce or LeBron James or Serena Williams, right? And I think it's good for us to love these people and for us to really look at their lives for what their lives must be like when they're not on stage, when they're not on the court. It's one thing to fantasize about being Beyonce or dancing like Beyonce, but it's another thing to know what Beyonce's life is like, the kind of discipline it must take to become Beyonce. I've never slept. I don't know why this is my fate in the world, but I've never slept next to Beyonce. But I know what she does in the morning when she gets in the shower. She does scales because that's what singers do in the morning when they get in the shower. They do, re, mi, so, fa, la, ti, do it out, and they are removing all of the guck that came into their nasal passageway. And knowing that about her lets me know that I have to be that same thing to poetry. So I need to do something for my poems every day. I need to remember poet as identity. I think I would tell my 7 or 8 year old self to remember that whatever it is that they love, they have to begin to see it as identity. And I feel like I'm just as much a poet as I am Southern. I feel like I'm just as much a poet as I am Black, and therefore I'm servicing that all day, every day. Right? I'm reacting and acting with that in mind. If you're a dad, if you're a mom, there are certain things that I know what it's like to be Naomi's son. And I know being Naomi's son takes a certain kind of There are certain duties that come along with it that might not come along with being, your mother's son or somebody else's
Right.
mother's son, but y'all got duties too. Do you
Correct.
understand what I mean?
Indeed. Yeah.
And so what does it mean? That's what I would probably say to my younger self. Like, what does it mean, this thing that you want to be? And that way I won't be, if I could tell myself that, I won't be surprised by how much work it takes and by how much fun that work can be. It's one thing to think about, oh, I got to do all this work to get it done, but it's another thing to think about, I want to practice the way LeBron James practices. Now that sounds like a good time. Do you follow what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things. The other thing, I mean, I'm saying a lot of things. I guess I got a lot to say to myself.
That's
but,
okay.
the last thing I would say is just to remember that anything you do well, you did not do it well the first time you tried to do it. And I know for a fact, I ask my students this all the time. I say, who can cook? And then, some students raise their hand. I say, no. Who can really cook? Who can cook so well that they can get a ring for it? Like, who am I going to propose to based on their lasagna? You know what I mean? And, one student's hand will be left up and I say, okay, tell me what happened the first time you made that lasagna. And everybody who's ever made a lasagna burned the lasagna the first time, or they made a nasty lasagna. Do you understand what I mean? Even more broad than that. The first time I ask my students, tell me about the first time you drove a car, and it's always a horror story for every student. And yet here they go trying to drive a car again after having run into everything in the neighborhood and scaring their parents to death. And yet here they go buying these ingredients all over again after having burned the lasagna and wasted that money. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think when you love something, you have to understand that whatever you love, you're also going to learn to love better, which means the first time you do it, you won't be great at it, but that's why you learn. LeBron James had to learn things. He's a much better player now than he was then.
So you always set me up for my next question. Really
good.
I really appreciate that, man. It's like we've done it. So before we got on here, I asked you a question before we even got started. I guess that's just, I didn't even think about it, but I did. I asked you how much you worked on poetry every single day. And you told me what?
2 hours a day.
So what I want you to share with our listeners is, obviously you have created habits and practice and training, and you believe in all of those things that are really important to get better at anything you want to be great at in life. But what's one habit that you would share with our listeners that if they committed to it, you feel it could change their life and has changed your life? One thing that you do every single day that could improve their life and has improved your life.
I think I mentioned it, actually. I think I think every one of us has something to be grateful for. And I think literally writing down every day, some people say 5 things, some people say 3 things. I think you can write down one thing you are grateful for every day. Just one. You don't even have to go beyond one. And if you can write down one thing you're grateful for every day and you sort of keep that in the same place, in the same book, you will notice as the days pass that you get better at writing that thing down. So you start with, I'm glad I'm alive. It's broad, it's general, it's abstract. I'm grateful for the breath in my body. But a few days of that, and you're doing this every day, and you get better at doing it, and you're suddenly grateful for the cardinal that you see that was on the mailbox in front of your house, and how that cardinal lets you know that you were still able to encounter beauty in this world. Do you see what I'm saying? And that gets better. Do you follow what I mean? And then you're really feeling like you have a different relationship to the world around you, because in everything you see, you start seeing things you hadn't seen before, right? And if you're seeing stuff you hadn't seen before, then you're changing the realm from which you can create, because you're creating from a position of gratitude. So that means you think things are there. It's not that you don't, it's not, you're not thinking about what's not there. You're not thinking about what you lack. You're thinking about what is, right? And the more you can think about what is, and the more you can think about what you're happy for, happy about, the more you can indeed bring more of that to yourself, more of that kind of thing. The more you can create that which you think needs to be there. So that's one thing that I think is good. I'm very much a creature. I'm just lucky to be a creature of habit. I wake up. I used to do 100 burpees, but now I can't get past 82. I wake up, I do 82 burpees, and then I eat something, and then I work. And the only reason it's 2 hours is because I know it's because I got hungry again, and I know it takes me about 2 hours to get hungry. And I look up, and indeed, it's 2 hours. You know, when I first start feeling the hunger, it's about an hour and 45 minutes, and I'm like, let me push a little more. And then after a while, it's 2 hours, and I'm like, I gotta eat. I better stop. You know. The other thing is, the other thing is, I don't expect to write a poem every time I write. You know, I sit down to fail. I sit down to have writing to go back to. I sit down to play. I always tell my students it's a good idea um, to to play like you're failing. You know, when you play basketball and you're not doing well, if you're playing against somebody, that really hurts. But you know, if you just keep shooting the ball in the basket by yourself and you missing, that hurts a little different. You know what I'm saying? Ain't nobody there to see it. You know what I mean? That don't hurt as bad. So, so you know, it's good to know you're in the room by yourself and you're trying to make something happen. Um, and you can find time for it. And when I'm really working, then the 2 hours expands. You know, when I was working on the tradition, I was working on it every hour I had. I had a I had a chain of friends, and what time they went to sleep, you know, and my friends on the West Coast got the latest emails because I would be like, here's some new work, take a look at it and tell me what you think. You know, my poet friends on the West Coast were like, Jericho, you really are writing. Because I had something. But, you know, at first, at the beginning, I want to give that creative time to about 2 hours a day. Yeah.
So
I wouldn't start there, though. Start small.
Okay.
You know, I mean, if you want to write, I mean, whatever it is you want to do, I mean, I can do 2 hours a day the same way I can do other things because I've been doing them for a long time. But if you want to do something and you haven't done it before, it's okay to start small. What happened? You know, one thing I do with my students is I have them write without stopping for 10 minutes straight and to write whatever they have to write. And then they look up and they've got 2 full pages. And I'm like, what happened to that writer's block you thought you had? You know, 10 minutes? So, you know, you start small.
So I've known you for a while. And so
Mhm.
one of the things I know, and this is insider information because I've seen um, your voice in the midst of educated, strong-willed voices. So for those
Mhm.
of you who don't know anything about Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity
Mhm.
Incorporated, there weak people do not show up to that space. Okay, uh, to put it lightly. And so I have seen in the midst of um, furious debates, absolutely furious debates, you sit back and watch, and you listen, and then you raise your hand, and then you say something, and I've seen the entire room go, "Hey, you know, he makes a good point." So, um, and I mention that because with success and also the respect that comes, that people sometimes give you because of your success, even if they don't know you individually, they
Mhm.
they kind of grant you that.
Mhm.
With all of that also comes responsibility too.
Mhm.
And I what I do know of you is that it is not just about you, but it is also about what you hope people see or can see in themselves by seeing
Mhm.
what you do.
Mhm.
What is that? Because for a lot of people, that's a burden. That's why some people are successful in
Mhm.
their own right, but don't talk to me. I don't want to be around anybody. So my success
Mhm.
basically is
Mhm.
my bank account balance.
Mhm.
But the more you kind of put yourself out there, the more that responsibility grows.
Mhm.
And I assume that sometimes it can be a burden, but it's also a noble burden. Um, can you talk a little bit about what that means to know that you are kind of the pebble in the pond, but that those rings emanate out, and you know they do because
Mhm.
that's you're writing poems that did not exist before to fill those spaces. So, what is that responsibility like that comes along with being successful,
Mhm.
or what is it?
Um, I guess I don't think as much about responsibility as I do vulnerability, and I know you can't fall in love if you're not vulnerable, which I
Mhm.
think is very difficult for men in particular, right? Because over and over again, and sometimes it's true. We
Mhm.
have talked about the fact that it's true, but we're told not to be vulnerable and not to show vulnerability. And
Mhm.
sometimes you can't be vulnerable, and sometimes you shouldn't show vulnerability. And yet, I'm a person who in spite of knowing that sometimes you can't be vulnerable and you shouldn't show vulnerability, I'm interested in it because I know on the other side of it is, either castigation or love. And so I don't mind, I think I've been castigated so much. I don't mind it. Like I can deal with a little, I can deal with people lying on me. It's bad. I used to hate, people would lie on me, Brother Gray, and I would be so hurt. I remember that song. It's actually a remake. I think James Cleveland did it first, but Vicky Winans has that song. Been lied on, cheated, talked about, mistreated, abused, scorned. You know what I mean? Talked about show as you born. And she gets to that one part of that song where she says lied on a lot of times in a row. And the choir singing the rest of the lyrics. And I'm like, this woman really did get lied on. Um, so I think if I can put myself in a position where I sort of measure out, what people have to say about me and what ultimate meaning it has. Um, and the fruits of becoming vulnerable to a situation. So I made a promise. I made what we call a pledge in 1995 with 10 other guys who are the best. They're the best, and it makes me emotional to think about them right now because they've been so supportive about this whole thing lately, and they are proud of me, and I'm proud of their pride, and I understood we were in very difficult, what seemed to us, looking back, it's like, what? Why what were we stressed out about? But we were
Right.
in what seemed the most difficult situation of our lives, and I didn't know them.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I had
Right.
seen some of them around. It was 11 of us staying in one house trying to memorize our mother's birth dates. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so and we did that because we were willing to become vulnerable, and we also fought all the time while we were doing that. And so I know, in spite of the fact that we fought all the time, that what we have now is a love greater than what those fights would have ever been. I believe that I know, I'll say it this way. I know that there are people who have done what I do and were not able to benefit from it in the way that I can. I mentioned this just now. The second Black person to win a Pulitzer Prize in poetry was in the 1980s. The first Black person was in the very early 50s, Gwendolyn Brooks, whose name many of us know. There, but by the time I won a Pulitzer Prize, I think the eighth winner, maybe the seventh or eighth winner of the Pulitzer Prize that's Black in poetry. So I have ancestry. I have role models. And I have people who were not, I know there are people who did what they did for me without thinking of me, without knowing me. I mean, this is why it was so important for me to pledge that particular fraternity. It seemed to me they had the roster full of folk. You think about people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Thurgood Marshall, W.B. Du Bois. These are people who are writing and thinking and marching based on folk who ain't even born yet. So I imagine it's not hard for me, Greg Gray, to imagine that my small impact, my seeming small impact in a single moment makes a difference in ways that I won't be able to understand after I'm gone. Now, I don't do what I do for that because I can't count on it. I don't know how to measure it. I can't quantify it. But it's
Right.
better that I understand that it's there and that I live my life like it's there. Um, and that, I mean, so it's not why I do what I do. I do what I do because I love it, but it has a lot to do with how I do what I do.
Mm, awesome.
So Jericho, at the end of these podcasts, I always do a recap, and I have 2 pages. So I'm going to try to get through this fast. But before I get to that, I want to thank you. I live for stimulating conversations. There's not a lot of them these days. A lot of people will talk about very surface material things, and I want to say thank you for stimulating me today, because this conversation was probably one of the best. Your perspective on life, your perspective on success is different than many, and I think on point. So I just want to say thank you. I appreciate this conversation. I've been in this the entire time, listening to every word that you've said, and I'm just honored uh, to be able to have a conversation with someone like you. So thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you.
So some takeaways when it comes to success from Jericho Brown: um, get a view within other people that can create success. Um, Plain speak with dignity. Learn to love books. Live with a purpose. All successful people have many moments of wanting to give up. Not the first person to struggle, so my life is easy compared to the others before me. Have a why, have mind control. Unite with people that go with your dreams. That was the biggest one for me. I'll have to say, um, be careful who you care about what they think of you. Become vulnerable, and that's when you'll really grow. Start small in your habits. Don't try to go all in, because you'll probably fail.
Mhm.
Do what you need, not what other needs. Always tell the truth in your work. Uh, and I'm having a hard time reading my handwriting here. If you saw it, it's terrible. Um, oh, sit down to fail. I love that one.
Mhm.
Um, Success is being happy with thyself. Write something that you're grateful for every single day. Stay calm. Have trust in yourself. Anxiety is temporary. Discipline is the most important thing, I think, in your success.
Mhm.
Dedication and duty to your passion. Practice like LeBron James or Beyonce, like they practice. And think about that when you want to have success. And you never do something well the first time. And I love the analogy of lasagna. I love the analogy of, driving a car, and everyone thinks they should be great at everything. And I love that. And I think this is just a suggestion, and you don't, I'm nobody, right? But I think you should write a book of poetry about success
Mhm.
and share your perspective. I think a lot of people would get a lot out of it, and sharing your journey and sharing what it takes to be successful around these. And I think it would be an amazing book that I would love to just keep by my bedside and read every night before I go to bed, because I think your thought process is one of very few. So I don't know if you want to say any parting words, Greg, but I am so grateful for this
Thank
moment in my
you.
life.
Thank y'all for having me.
Well, I do, and so, that was Jay is a great note taker, so you can tell this is what he does. He is a sponge. Uh, my mind keeps going back to the cardinal on the mailbox.
Mhm.
You know that odd that this is the case, maybe not odd, but just divine. But there was a cardinal in our backyard. I was grilling this weekend. There was a cardinal in the backyard, and I hadn't seen one in a while. And I was looking at it, and I said, I can't remember the last time I saw something that beautiful. So I took a picture of it and took a video of it and sent it to my grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
And they just, because kids, everything is a marvel to them.
Yeah.
And I realized in that moment, it's kind of like almost what second grade Nelson
Mm-hmm.
needs to keep saying to Dr. Jericho Brown.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that there are marvels in these little moments and
Yeah.
not to lose them. And I would absolutely be remiss if I didn't tell you that um, I personally, and this is very selfish, uh, feel like my stock has gone up because people now know not just the Pulitzer Prize winning poet, Dr. Jericho Brown, but that oneness that you spoke of and an alignment and being able to kind of share and know part of someone else's mission and them knowing part of your mission
Mhm.
is a very big part of what we share as brothers in Alpha. And
Mhm.
so thank you not only for elevating me, for elevating our fraternity with your achievement. And that achievement is the work, the outcome is a Pulitzer Prize. So thank
Mhm.
you, Brother
Thank
Dr.
you.
Jericho Brown.
Thank you. Thank you so
It's been
much.
an absolute joy to have you with us
Thank you.
here
Thanks for
today.
having me. Thank you. It's
Okay.
very nice to meet you, Jay. Congrats on everything, y'all.
Thanks, Dr. Brown.
All
Have a
right.
great day.
Talk to you later.